Have you ever questioned why you should even know what you desire? You frequently experience an almost irresistible want to behave differently. Why do certain choices appear to be influenced by an unseen worry? What will other people think? Consider you modify your actions. Pick your words intentionally stifle opinions rather than sense it shows who you are, although because you're afraid of the discomfort that disapproval, being truthful, will make you aware of to a greater or lesser degree. You want, we all get, approval, and that's just what the trap is, that society wasn't created to allow you to be genuine. It was made to be flexible for you. You've known since you were a young child that acceptance is a precious commodity, that praising results in rewards for obedience, ensures belonging without your knowledge. You were taught to mix up personal valuable with outside confirmation. Thus, the pursuit of acceptance becomes intensely ingrained in your mind. The hidden consequence, however, is that the more you try to be accepted, stray from your own decisions, lose their authenticity, and are influenced by your actions, are motivated by a fear of being rejected. Transform into a play. Your liberty turns into an invisible stage performance audiences. You become a hostage in your heart to other people's viewpoints, and your life ends. To belong to you, Jung recognized this ominous dynamic as the privilege of a few others. He said, life is to discover your true self. However, if you live, how is that possible? Stuck in a persona you created to endure in this world? This is the agony of pursuing approval builds a mask or identity that after time starts to resemble who you really are. Additionally, the more you support this character, the more you learn about yourself. Even worse are the elements of an authentic center you repress in order to preserve this idealistic. Imagine your anxieties, desires, and wrath descend into obscurity, and as your sincerity is cultivated by your shadow fades. This harsh paradox states that the more you try to gratify as few people as possible, the more you try to be yourself, the more you reject yourself, the more you're accepted. The endeavor to shape oneself into what the world expects you to keep your distance from what might be your strongest suit. The guts to be authentic. In this video, you'll learn how everything shifts when you choose to give up looking for approval. We'll investigate Jung's thoughts on psychological types and the reasons behind some profiles are more susceptible to this trap. We'll examine the function of the persona, comprehends the transformational strength of the shadow, and recognize the individualization process, the path to becoming entire. But a heads up, courage is needed for the voyage. It is more comfortable enough to maintain its appeal, simpler to continue playing the part that others project upon you. Nevertheless, the simple question is, do you want to be welcomed or do you desire freedom? Seldom do the two go together. If you possess the bravery to confront this invisible, this film might be a game changer in prison. Time in your life, the decision is entirely up to you. Are you prepared to start? Ever ponder why certain individuals appear to be in dire need of the acceptance of others, but others can pursue their own course in spite of rejection and criticism? It's not only regarding determination or life experiences. Carl has a far deeper root than that. In his tremendous endeavor, Jung revealed Jung's classification of psychological kinds. Every one of us has a dominant psychological kind that influences how we view the world and engage with This orientation may be inward-looking, outward, extroversion or introversion, but that was only the start of Jung's journey. Further, and outlined 4 fundamental psychological processes, such as thinking and feeling, perception and intuition, and this is a profound realization. Depending on how these work, show your susceptibility to the pursuit of acceptance can be radically different individuals whose the dominance of psychological functioning, for instance, extroverted feelings are somewhat more vulnerable to this trap. Why? Considering that their internal compass is influenced by their social surroundings. They assess their acts' value and even their opinions based on the fact that others' acceptance, value, or desire issue the external environment is unstable, erratic, and frequently harsh placement. Your identity in this game's hands is a surefire way to suffer right now. Consider an individual who has a dominant thinking introvertedly. They can be just as exposed, although in a different manner. In this instance, the fear of rejection does originate not from a desire to please, but rather from the apprehension of revealing opinions or convictions that could be disregarded. The outcome is the same restraint of self-censorship, and a half-light is the constant fall of life, lacking the full potential that Jung tells us that regardless of your psychological type that is sought after, approval can be obtained in subtle ways to enter your mind. And the more you disregard this influence, the more governs. Your typology is a map rather than a fate, because after you comprehend your fundamental configuration, may you start to eliminate the innate urges that cause you to yield to social acceptance. The bigger risk is in how this over a lifetime orientation crystallizes. The more you reward an action that aims to, the more you practice your ability to please brain, to rely on that outside verification. This gradually molds not just your views, but your own perception of yourself. You start to think that you're just worthy if you're acknowledged, as the only have worth if others agree. Here's how you end up in jail, but here's the harsh reality is that nobody can please everyone. Additionally, the more you attempt, the farther you keep your distance from yourself, each a compromise made out of concern for being disapproved of is like a little murder of your genuineness. Additionally, the total of these minor killings creates a distant and empty life from one's actual self. Thus, the initial step in releasing yourself is to understand how this pattern is fueled by psychological type. Not to place the blame on you, but to turn into, be mindful to begin saying no when the natural inclination would be to please. Dare to stand your ground despite criticism is unavoidable. And most all, keep in mind that your inner tranquility is priceless. More than others' erratic approval. However, being aware of your personality type and your conditioning is only the first step. Is a force considerably more potent at work. A force behind the scenes in your mind that changes the pursuit of approval into a real mask theater. And we shall discuss the topic in the following section. The social persona mask that you may wear on a daily basis, already forgotten that it's only a mask. Don't pass this up if it's making clicking the subscribe button makes sense to you. And please subscribe to the channel. For your assistance, you're not who you believe yourself to be, and I will demonstrate to you that everyone wears masks. This will inevitably happen from an early age. Develop specific behaviors to be accepted, appreciated, acknowledged. You grin. You say when you don't feel like it. When it's not you everything is all right. Adjust to situations where you feel unpleasant merely to keep from being seen. Every one of these minor adjustments produces your character. The persona was defined by Carl Jung in 2 Analytical Psychology essays as a section of the mind that develops to arbitrate the connection between the society and the individual. It is basically a social mask, and this is the specific information that few realize, that the persona isn't an issue alone. It is essential. We couldn't do it without it. Function in society, we require roles, social, family, and professional survival in the outside world. However, there is a danger that is both subtle and lethal. When you relate to your persona too strongly, you lose yourself in something that should only be a concealment. A practical role turns into your identity. You lose sight of your true self because you're totally engrossed in the mask you created to win people over. It is right here that the search for the ego turns into a profound trap for approbation, is influenced by outside expectations. The harder it is to please others, the more you support a romanticized image, and this identity is further supported by the more you deviate from who you really are. You now live for others, not for yourself. To keep the personality, be brutally honest with yourself about your life. How many choices did you make just to fulfill the expectations of others? What number of relationships do you have kept up to prevent disappointed? How have you silenced your actual voice numerous times? Viewpoint to maintain a picture. Each of these decisions strengthened your identity and suppressed your true self a bit more. And now for the harsh reality. As long as you are investing to swallow in order to keep up this persona, you will never be free, since freedom necessitates truth, and truth necessitates the bravery to disappoint, to be sure, but mostly to let down the impression you made. Agreed. Jung cautions that the procedure of individuality, the process of discovering your true self, only starts when you understand that you are not the persona as long as you think you're wearing this social disguise. Will be destined to live a life of perpetual alertness, rejection, anxiety, and an internal peace that never comes. However, the route to this freedom is not straightforward. It necessitates a profound confrontation with the unconscious powers that maintain the character. Additionally, one of these forces is incredibly strong: the worry of what you conceal. You are afraid of your own shadow. What maintains the persona? And that's what we must face if we genuinely wish to escape the reliance on outside approval. We shall delve into this in the following section. Gloomy and intriguing terrain. You'll comprehend how the integration of the shadow is the crucial stage in order to eliminate the fear of being rejected and recover your authenticity. Prepare yourself, since the confrontation won't be cozy. But without it, freedom is not possible. The query you must pose to yourself. It's painfully easy now. Have you been living in accordance with who you believe you ought to be? If you've had the bravery to watch this video through to the end point, that you've already started to recognize that the image you portray is not who you really are to the world. But the first step is realizing the mask. The true difficulty is in breaking it down, which calls for a thorough take, a deep dive into the adventure that individualization is what Jung referred to in the collective and the archetypal unconscious. And in Quest of a Modern Man, Jung explains individuation in terms of a soul. as a means of becoming who you really are, not what your family, society, or despite what traumas say. Don't be erroneous. This is among the most difficult procedures that a person can undertaking, since it calls for you to break purposefully and consciously with your deceptive self. The deceptive self is the result of years, even decades, of conditioning. It's been molded through rules, both express and tacit, that boys don't cry, girls ought to be kind. Success entails failure is a disgrace. You will only be, if you are flawless, you will be liked. These messages all contain embedded itself within your mind, creating a fake self that you started to think was genuine, and the reason you took. This action is the only way to live in a world that appreciates conformity. It's simpler to be. When you adjust to expectations, you are accepted. The issue is that every adaptation has you stray slightly more from your essence. The cost of gaining social acceptance is the self-individuation's alienation. Is this silent process being undone? Make a deal with mediocrity. It is the way to return to genuineness. Yet there are no flowers on this path. On the contrary, it always passes through deconstruction of pain and loneliness, because when the false ego is broken, you will always let people down. Your friends, family, and culture, and maybe even more challenging, you let down your romanticized self-image constructed of oneself. However, this is the reality that nobody speaks about. It is a labor, and this agony is required. Suffering, the true self must die for the old self. Self to emerge without this interruption, you will continue to be incarcerated even if you call. Jung tells us to live life to the fullest. Individualization is not a condition under which accomplished and completed. It is an ongoing run, a cycle of continuous reconstruction and deconstruction, an appeal to incorporate all that has been denied, repressed, or warped in the name of approval. But how do you handle that? Step: how to face the components of yourself that you've dedicated your entire concealing one's life here. One of the most profound and most difficult ideas of Jung, the role of psychology, is to integrate the shadow. The shadow serves as a storehouse for all that you have suppressed: fear of rejection, your inclinations, your wants, your undesirable feelings, and as long as this shadow is avoided, you will continue to be held captive during the search. Fundamentally, it is a fear for approbation that the shadow is going to emerge. In the following section, we will examine in how it develops in depth and why integrating the most important step in releasing free oneself from reliance on outside acceptance of what you're listening to connects. With you, you'll discover genuine value in Beyond the Shadow. One of my ebooks dissects Jung's core concepts, while Conversations with the Unconscious Mind provide you a 30-day guide to implementing them in your daily life. The pinned comment contains links to both. We have now reached the crux of the issue. Everything we have looked into thus far, psychological social conditioning, the persona, indicates a single typology, the black center that quietly controls your search for acceptance. Carl Jung's shadow devoted a large portion of his career to this idea, and he demonstrates to us in Jung that the shadow is made up of everything you reject yourself, not only your shortcomings and imperfections, but additionally your unrealized potential, unacknowledged fury that has been suppressed power, your yearning for independence in every way that you once thought about undesirable, improper, or excessive, risky to display to the world. Yet, what does this relate to the anxiety, that disapproval of everything? The need for acceptance mostly stems from the worry that people may notice what you conceal, what you are unable to accept. As long as you retain certain aspects of yourself in the basement of your mind, you will always be susceptible to danger from others. Evaluation. Every critique will have an impact on a gaping wound. Each rejection will be a danger of exposure, so you'll stay stuck in the never-ending challenging game to appease in order to avoid being exposed. The radical is integrating the shadow, turning within and expressing, I see, I accept you, and I acknowledge you. It is an agonizing procedure because to face the shadow is to face all of your worst fears about being the jealous, combative, petty, and all of these elements are vulnerable and in need. Denying them is not a part of who you are. Instead, the more they vanish, the more you suppress it, the more it manages your life from behind the scenes. Integration occurs when you permit these contents that will become apparent in a deliberate and restrained way. When you acknowledge that you are capable of negative emotions, but that doesn't define you. When you accept everything, you grow less reliant on others, on outside verification, as there are no more secrets to keep safe. There is no longer a requirement to have an excellent persona. Don't forget to incorporate the shadow does not imply impetuous behavior. Considering your suppressed urges, it implies intentionally incorporating them so that they become allies instead of internal adversaries. A person who has merged their shadow is complete, and whole people are not afraid. Refusal, since they have completely accepting oneself, is the real conclusion of the apprehension of rejection. It is not a game of strength or indifference. It is a profound state of acceptance of oneself. That eliminates the requirement for consent. Once you're not afraid of yourself, the other people's stares lose their ability to do harm. No matter how strong the theory is, you becomes considerably more powerful when represented in reality, and nobody demonstrated this process of shattering away from integration and approval genuineness similar to that of Jung in his departure from Freud and the psychoanalytic institution makes a living, an illustration of the need for brutal courage to pursue one's inner calling, despite the price of being alone and being criticized. We shall delve into this in the following section. Jung's break with Freud is an inspirational story, and comprehend how he dealt with his own shadow and came back to life as the author of psychological analysis. If you'd want to see, don't miss how theory turns into reality. The account of Jung's separation from there is much more to Sigmund Freud than a divergence in theory. It was a real rite of passage, a brave deed that put Jung in danger of colliding with all of his accomplishments until that point, professional reputation and point. Recognition, security, a position of leadership in the breaking with the psychoanalytic movement. Freud was more than just a scholar. Choice. It was a significant shift of individualization as a conflict with his own darkness and with the deepest apprehension of all the anxiety over getting turned down by the people we most admire. In Recollections, Dreams, and Musings, Jung explains this procedure in a harsh truthfulness. For many years, he was regarded as the psychoanalysis's natural heir. In addition to being his mentor, Freud was also a nearly fatherly figure, a great citation in the field of thought. Being with Freud at the moment meant serving as the focal point of a revolution in the comprehension of the human mind. But over time, Jung came to understand that on his personal perception of the psyche could no longer be kept under control by Freudian theory's frameworks. Freud maintained a nearly exclusive justification for sexuality as the primary power of the mind. This was intolerable to Jung. Reduction, he had gone deeply into encounters, archetypal dreams, and vision signs that indicated a person's mental state more extensive, intricate, and spiritual than Freud was able to acknowledge. Then came the pivotal moment when Jung was aware that by going his own way, he would be placed in isolation. He was aware that he would be charged with heresy in thought. He was aware that the acceptance of the circle of psychoanalysis would be swapped out for contempt and criticism. Lastly, personal betrayal is the worst. Nevertheless, he decided to move forward, not without suffering, but not without fear, but with steadfast honesty in the time frame referred to as his encounter with the unconscious. Jung went into a serious crisis, questioned alone and without assistance of the scientific community that had, after being praised, he submerged himself in archetypal alchemy, research, mythology, everything that helped him grow, analytical psychology. However, take note of this, only because of Jung was it feasible to cross. Had to face